People say, you know who those people are? Those are Baha'is. You know who that man is, that woman is? That's a Baha'i. Well, what does that mean then to the people of the world, unless it means a spirit and a conduct and an attitude that is what they are looking for, and is what, incidentally, Baha'u'llah is looking for too. You know, it says in the writings that he can make a gnat, a little fly, into an eagle, and a drop into an ocean. I think that we have to realize that by ourselves, on our own power, so to speak, we're not going to be able to accomplish very much, because we are not very much to do the accomplishing. But the power of Baha'u'llah, the power of the faith, the power of making an effort to obey the teachings of the faith, and above all, the power of prayer, can make us gnats into eagles and drops into ocean. I'm sure that all of us who've had the privilege of meeting with these officials the last few days and meeting with the press all the time, we have been conscious of the power and mercy of Baha'u'llah. I don't think any of us thought we were so hot, or that it was us and anything in us that was great enough or important enough, you see, to hopefully have the influence which we seem to be having on these people. It was the power of God, because we turned to God and begged Him to help us, because we knew that without His help we wouldn't be able to do very much. And we received His help. I think that these are the great miracles of God, that when we turn to Him and we ask His help, He gives us that help. It says, you know, in the writings, forgetful of self, but ever mindful of what is thine. This isn't a forgetful of self period in history, as you know. All the emphasis is on the human ego, on how important you are, of how wonderful you are, that you should be pushed forward, that you should shine, that you should be the thing that other things center about and revolve around. But that's not according to Baha'u'llah. He says, forgetful of self, but ever mindful of what is thine. There used to be a prayer. Some of the old Baha'is in this room may remember it. It was a little black prayer book, not even as big as that, about that size. And it said Baha'i prayers in gold print on it. And it was the first prayer book I ever had in my life. I think when I was around 8 or 9 years old. Anyway, my first childhood prayer book, the first one I ever saw. And there was a prayer in that was a prayer of Abdul-Baha, and fairly long, you know, not very long prayer, but not a very short prayer. And in it said, protect me from the inordinate self. It tempts at every breath and sets a new snare at every step. And then I never saw this again. I used to look in the later prayer books and I never could find this prayer. So I said to Mr. Faizi, have you ever heard this prayer? Or is this one of those things that was sort of cooked up in the early days? And is it authentic? He said, no, it exists. I don't think it has been retranslated. And it certainly hasn't been reprinted. But the original of this prayer is now in Haifa. We have it. We know that the prayer is there and it is authentic. For many years they couldn't find the original, so I suppose that's why they didn't reprint it. But it's very important. Protect me from the inordinate self. It tempts at every breath and sets a new snare at every step. Really, ultimately in life, there's only one thing in the whole world to be afraid of, and that is yourself. You needn't be afraid of anybody else, because they can't do you very much damage, even if they kill you, which we've seen with these wonderful martyrs in Persia. All right, they killed them. They didn't do anything more than kill them, you know. The only danger anybody is ever in is from himself and his own ego. You know, recently we had this film, I don't think you've seen it yet. It was made by the BBC. They have a British Broadcasting Corporation in England, their TV department. And they have a program called Everyman. And this program, every now and then it comes out with a series. And it's coming out now, has already commenced, with a series, I think, of 9 different, not sure just exactly what it is. It's something to do with religion, but whether it goes into peculiar religions or sectarianism or the great religions, I don't know. But I do know that the first thing on the program, as you probably heard, was the Baha'i faith. And it was a 50-minute presentation. Now, they came to America, they filmed the temple, they went to the Louis Gregory Institute, they interviewed Baha'is in England, and they came to the World Center, and they, I must say, I think they must have had 28 or 30 hours of film easily, very easily. And this producer is a very fine young man. His name is Norman Stone. He's very gifted, and he does religious programs. Now, he had a crew of people that they hired on the spot. Didn't bring their own photographer and cameraman, but very, very gifted, very top-notch crew. And these people worked with us day after day. And the thing that impressed them, that they could not recover from, so to speak, was the kindness with which they were treated and the harmony between the Baha'is. I remember this Jewish girl who was the coordinator of the whole thing in Israel, this part of the program. She said, you know, I don't understand it at all. I don't know what this is. I cannot understand it. I've never seen anything like it in my whole life. I said, what do you mean? Well, she said, I don't know. It's what we feel. It's the way you treat us. It's the way you treat each other. Well, this is what people are going to be impressed by. They're not going to be impressed by a lot of more words. There's plenty of words. Everybody's saying pretty well the same thing. The Christians say it, and the Jews say it, and the Muslims say it, and this sect says it, and that sect says it, you know. A great deal of everything that we Baha'i say, everybody else says anyway. So that isn't going to impress them very much. You get the whole thing together, it's very impressive. But that's not what is going to bring people into the faith. At least I don't think it is. It may attract them, but I don't think it will convert them. But what they see between the Baha'is, in Baha'i homes, between Baha'i friends, in the meetings of the Baha'is, this breath of friendship and companionship and decency and courtesy, consideration, I think that these are the things which humanity is starving to death for and dying to receive more of. We had a very lovely experience. I'd just like to tell you about it. I don't know what has to do with the program, but it's something really very beautiful that happened recently in Haifa just before Violet and I left. We had a Persian refugee to Bangladesh, an elderly woman with white hair, creature like that, a little bird, arrive in Haifa as a pilgrim. And she didn't speak anything but Persian, and she had come entirely alone, which I think is a miracle. I mean, it would like be sending me off to China without one single human being to accompany me that could read, write, or speak one single word of Chinese. So she goes to Bombay, and somebody there puts her on a bus and sends her to an airport, and she has a piece of paper showing where she wants to go and a ticket that she can waive. She gets to Egypt and she's lost all of her baggage, and she still can't speak a word. She's missed the plane connection because her plane was late. And somebody miraculously who is going to Israel the following day, said, well, all right, I will take you. You stick by me and I'll get you there. Then she gets to Haifa, and somebody put her on a cheroot, one of these communal taxis, and when she sees the shrine, she knocks on the shoulder of the chauffeur and says, so he takes her up and puts her at the shrine. Eventually she gets her luggage and so on. Now she's going back to Bangladesh, if you don't mind, alone. So we said to her, but Khanum, you came all alone. How could you do this? You don't know one word of any foreign language. How did you get from Bangladesh to Haifa? She said, I didn't come alone. We knew she'd come alone. Nobody else had come from Bangladesh or India. We said, but you didn't have anybody with you. She said, I didn't come alone. Baha'u'llah came with me. And I'm sure that he went back with her. Now, the interesting thing about this woman, to me, in my life, is, it's a long story, which I'm not going to take up time telling about her Muslim husband divorcing her and bringing up the daughter and all kinds of things. But the thing that impressed me about this woman was that I felt at last I had contacted the spirit of the Persian martyrs. It was very strange. I mean, good gracious, I've been reared on martyrdom. There wasn't a time in my life that people weren't being martyred in Persia, and we didn't hear about it in Montreal and in the Holy Land in the lifetime of the Guardian, and since then and everything else. But I don't think I ever quite realized what this quality is in the Persian Baha'is that has led to their dying with such fortitude and often joy. When I saw this woman, I realized, I thought, this is a thing in this woman that now I have seen quieted up, because the kind of spirit she has, nothing can put down. It's the kind of spirit that says, no, go ahead and kill me, I won't deny my faith. It's really very, and she was illiterate too. I think that's very comforting too. In our course of our conversation with the Secretary General, telling him about different things, we mentioned the evolution of the faith, and mentioned the fact that in the past, and there was a Russian there who was the head of the whole Peace Year program for the United Nations. His name is Ustinov, very distinguished looking man and certainly a very shrewd man. And I was saying that how, when I was a child, there was nothing but people within a certain category that were Baha'is. We had very few professional men, very rarely anybody that was well-to-do, wealthy, very few PhDs, and very few working-class people. It was all mostly the lower middle class, very modest people. But that now I had lived to see that we had more PhDs, we had more wealthy Baha'is, we had more Baha'is who were famous and in the forefront of whatever it might be, their profession, their interests, and then we had not only poor Baha'is, the other class, but we had illiterate Baha'is all over the Baha'i world. And I cited how we had had illiterate Baha'is come as delegates to the International Baha'i Convention for the election of our supreme body, and through one of secretaries cast by proxy their vote because they couldn't read or write. Well, you see, these are tremendously impressive things. And of course, then we could tell them about the development of the faith, and you know, spiritual assemblies, and we call them spiritual because they're not political, and national spiritual assemblies, and being the Electoral College and the Universal House of Justice, and the Universal House of Justice being the supreme body, and so on. So that these things are so interesting to people. We have so many fascinating facets of the Baha'i faith and its activities that really interest and attract people. One of the other things, I'm sure that Jerry would bear me out, one of the other things that I think impressed all of us very much was the extremely sympathetic attitude of the press. And I think that, if I understood it correctly, every single occasion that the international Baha'i community had arranged for, luncheons and press conference, many more people came than they expected. If they expected 27 people, 35 or 40 came. They expected, what, 17 press people, wasn't it? How many came, Jerry? Yes, there were over 20 that were there. They were full of questions, full of interest, and very sympathetic. And I think that they are going to go away, and in various channels, they are going to be able to let the public get a glimpse of the Baha'i faith and the importance of the faith. The House of Justice is very concerned that as the persecution of the Baha'is in Persia gradually dies down, part of it due to public opinion, pressure, public opinion, and messages, and part of it due to the fact that I don't know how many more Baha'is they can go on catching and killing that are of any prominence. But whatever the reason, as the focus of attention, you know, good news being bad news in the world today, I mean bad news being news and good news not being news, the focus of attention may gradually come off the Baha'i faith. We may not find that we have so many opportunities. And consequently, I think that the House of Justice is very, very anxious that the Baha'is, in their activities, should try to keep before the public, before the press, before humanity, if you like, as much as possible, because we don't want to fade from the scene. We weren't on the scene for so many years. Now we don't want to fade from the scene. Now, these are ways in which all of us can help. I think that every single Baha'i has possibilities of helping. I think one of the ways that the Baha'is can help is, I don't mean here in a place like New York, but I mean out there where there's so many Baha'is in the islands and deserts and forests of the world. They have United Nations days, you see. I've been telling the members of the United Nations, the people there, that we constantly, it will be a small Baha'i community that will hold a United Nations Day celebration, sponsored where they live, because so completely we Baha'is believe in what the United Nations stands for and what it is striving for in the future. And I think that in every way that you can, but particularly through your attitude, you have to attract the public to the cause of God so that there will be a possibility of increasing our prestige in the eyes of the public and in the eyes of the media. Because we cannot, as I say, we can't possibly fade from the scene. We have gone forward, and this step that we have taken, whatever the nature of it was, so many different factors involved in it, is a tremendous step forward. I have been telling the Baha'is, because I heard, you know, the Baha'is sometimes make such negative remarks, and I get awfully tired of them when they're negative, because I don't think that's what Baha'u'llah wants. He says, be positive, mention the good and not the bad. Stop plucking the feathers out of everything all the time. Well, yes, but you don't like this, you don't like that, you don't like the other thing. And it's totally destructive. It's the very opposite of the spirit of the Baha'i teachings. But I heard people say, oh, this BBC program, 50 minutes, all about the cause, you see. And the House of Justice and the mansion in Baji and the shrine on Mount Carmel and the whole works. And yet still they have to start getting a hold of a few pin feathers and plucking them out. And I said, look, this is one of the most important things that has happened since the martyrdom of the Baha'i. Because maybe in the end 100 million people will see this film. So you see, we have turned a corner. We are going forward in a way that we have never gone forward before. And so many Baha'is, whether they happen to be big Baha'is in the sense that they have some position in their profession or whatever it may be, their business in the eyes of the public, they are in the forefront, so anyway can say they're Baha'i, and that's good advertising for the cause. But even the very smallest and humblest Baha'i can show forth by their conduct and their attitude, their words, by perhaps sharing a Baha'i pamphlet or literature and so on with other people. They can be instrumental in riding this great forward wave. And if we don't ride the wave of this message of the House of Justice, well, I just dread to think of our individual responsibility. Because this message has released forces in the world that are tremendous. If the Secretary General of the United Nations had not accepted to receive the Baha'i delegation and to receive himself by hand the message of the Universal House of Justice, or it had not been received by the United Nations, but above all by the Secretary General, the embodiment of it, if you like, do you realize how bad that would be spiritually for the United Nations? You take a step in the direction of Baha'u'llah, you attract his bounties and blessings. If you don't take the step, you don't get the bounty and the blessings, you see. So I think we have to realize that what has happened the last week here in New York, the response to the desires of the House of Justice, to the message of the House of Justice, to the push towards peace, and the declaration of what peace means, in the words of Baha'u'llah, by the House of Justice, this has released great forces. Now we have to ride this wave. I know everybody's very excited about this message, but it is of tremendous importance. And if we become the embodiments in our home life, in our community life, in our assemblies, of the spirit of peace which Baha'u'llah has given to the world, then we will attract the hearts of people. Then we will find the entry by troops. If we can show what peace and a loving Baha'i community and a united Baha'i community, family or the whole business, means, you cannot keep people out of this faith because they are dying of hunger spiritually. And they want real bread, and the bread is the example and what they receive from us. So I think that we have tremendous possibilities ahead of us and tremendous responsibilities. And I'm so happy to hear, since I have come here, I've heard that the New York community has developed so wonderfully, that this Hazira that you bought, that the last time I was here, I saw that you are using it, and that you're having many activities in it, and that people come, and that you have firesides and classes, and that it is actually a center which attracts the believers and enables them to have a place to bring the public. Everything that I've heard about the New York Baha'i community has made me so happy. I'm sorry, friends, that I won't be able to stay, because you can perhaps imagine that I'm rather tired. It's been a very grueling week, because like all Baha'is, you have this feeling of your own inadequacy, and you are afraid that you may fail, you see. And that if you have been given a job to do and been given an opportunity, how terrible it will be if you aren't able to live up to that, and if you should fail. So I have suffered a great deal the last week and prayed a great deal. And through the prayers of the House of Justice and the prayers of the friends and the mercy of God on all of us who were concerned in this event, it has gone off wonderfully. But I am particularly tired, and there are more events during the coming days. So you excuse me if I don't remain after the meeting, but just go home, go to bed, because I'm tired. But it's been wonderful to be with all of you.
Please have a seat, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to ask our wonderful, newly appointed councillor, Mr. Bob Harris, on behalf of his board and the rest of us, extend our official and formal thanks to Ruhiyyih Khanum. Mr. Bob Harris.
Why in the name of God Hussein wanted me to get up here, I'll never know. I thought he was my friend. There's an old Persian story, it's a saying, that when the nightingale is singing its love song to the beauty of the rose, the beetle should be quiet. Well, beetle-like, Hussein asked me to come up here, and I'm very happy to do that. On behalf of the Board of Counselors in the Americas and all of the auxiliary board members, several of whom I see here, especially our retired auxiliary board member, Catherine McLaughlin, who came with me tonight and got stuck in the Lincoln Tunnel, we are so delighted. Business as her assistant, and I never knew how deeply in trouble I would get. All I can tell you is that when I first became a Baha'i, someone said, you must go to this youth conference to meet the guardian's wife, and I said, I have to go, and the fellow was from North Carolina, and he said, your name was Ruhiyyih Khanum. And so for about 7 months as a new Baha'i, I said, I've got to go see Ruhiyyih Khanum. And since I'm a photographer, they asked me if I would, I know, they asked me if I would please take pictures of this lady. I said, okay. And they said she's going to be walking up the temple steps to say some prayers, and you'll know her right away, and so please just take a lot of pictures of her. And so these two ladies got out of the car. It was Mrs. Nachivani and Ruhiyyih Khanum. And I started taking about 100 pictures of Violette Nachivani. And I figured she looked like the person whose name would be Ruhiyyih Khanum. And when they got to the top of the steps, the hand of the cause said to me, you are a pain in the neck. I swear to God you said that. This has nothing to do with what she said before about never saying negative things. It has nothing to do. The next time she saw me, she said I needed to lose weight. We've had an enduring and ongoing relationship that can only go uphill from here. And I know that the great joy that she brings to all of the Baha'is here in the United States and at the United Nations, on behalf of the Universal House of Justice, I think has inspired all of our hearts. The House of Justice has done something for us that is unprecedented. They have proclaimed the message of Baha'u'llah to the entire planet, every person on it. And maybe it is time for us to do something unprecedented, to perhaps proclaim the faith into our own hearts and then share it with all of the people of the world. I am so happy you're here, and I'm so happy that we have an opportunity to be with you And I'm so happy that every person in this room is going to do something to advance the cause of peace. And so on behalf of all of the counselors in the Americas, all the board members, all of their assistants, God bless you and thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.